Smooth 98.1 Lagos, Nigeria world. Here we are, gone past 7:30, which of course you know means it's time for Freshly Pressed. And Freshly Pressed is a part of Smooth Breakfast, where I have my analysts come into the studio, come in and deal with the news that's affecting Nigeria and Nigerians as we are all here right now. Whether we're at home or abroad, this is the news we want to find out about and ask questions and see what's going on with. Joining me for the next half hour, I've got Mr. C in the studio. Good morning, Mr. C.
Good morning, Shopper. Good morning, Zibi. Good morning, Lagos. Happy holidays.
If you are joining us up on youtube.com/smooth 981 FM, and I welcome you all our YouTube videos, and you will see the other person in the studio, and you'll be hearing her voice sooner or later when she's ready. All right, so lots of stories to get into today. So do make sure you join the conversation up on YouTube. You can leave your comments up on the live stream. You can also send WhatsApp messages into 0809 440 981, and you can tweet at us. We are at Smooth981FM, and you can also tag Mr. C in. You can find him in French on Twitter at Monsieur C. There's three E's after that C. All right, so what we're going to do now is get straight into our very first story. It comes in from the Nation newspaper. Outrage over directive to scrap amnesty program in 6 months. This happening yesterday over a reported directive to the newly appointed interim, keyword interim administrator of the presidential amnesty program, Major General Barry Ndiomo, who's retired obviously, to end the scheme within 6 months. Now, multiple sources close to Ndiomo confirmed that he was mandated to close the program and scrapped the amnesty office on or before April 2023, which is quite interesting because it'll be just in time for the new administration. Mr. C, this is one bit of news that's creating shockwaves. Of course, we know back in 2009 when this amnesty program was first created, it was under the Yaradua administration. It was supposed to be a way to de-escalate what was going on with the militancy in the Niger Delta region. Counting down to 2022 now, have we seen that happen despite the large amounts of money that have gone into this program?
Okay, thank you, Shopper. So, the starting point for me is this.
Mhm.
This is a reported story, meaning it hasn't been confirmed officially. So, meaning there's room for the government to come out tomorrow and deny all of this. But let's work with what was reported
Mhm.
and imagine a scenario where this is actually true. Now, the presidential amnesty program was set up to disarm, to demobilize, and to reintegrate the militants and the restive youth of the Niger Delta back into the mainstream of Nigerian polity. Now, since then, it's been about 13 years, and clearly a lot of money has gone in. Now, the question is, has the presidential amnesty program fully achieved the objectives for which it was set up?
Question.
That's a very good question. I'm not sure the answer is yes, even though there's a school of thought that suggests that, look, this program cannot continue in perpetuity. It must come to an end someday.
And of course, we've seen how cash strapped the government has claimed it is, and we've kind of felt the effects as well. With the billions that is said to consume on an annual basis, and the fact that the current administration, that the federal government needs to clear off some of the burden, of financial burden on its place right now, this seems like one way to go. However, how is the Niger Delta going to take it?
So, for me, this reported move calls into question the credibility of this Nigerian government, the current Nigerian government, and I'm going to explain why.
Okay.
We've all agreed for months, if not years, that the fuel subsidy simply has to go. It cannot continue to stay. What was the reaction of the Nigerian government? We're going to end it next year by June, right? Meaning that they don't give the incoming administration the chance to decide whether they want to continue with it or not. And that was a decision they took. Now, in the same light, use that same principle. Why are you ending the presidential amnesty program months before the election or months before you hand over? Why not give the same incoming administration the chance to elect whether it will continue with the presidential amnesty program or not? Now, we're all witnesses to the general restiveness in the Niger Delta now. Crude oil is being stolen on a daily basis in huge quantities. Recently, companies were engaged to monitor the pipelines because the Nigerian Navy simply can't get the job done. Now, when you when you now decide to execute a policy like this, can the nation contend with the Niger Delta becoming restive again in the 2009 2008 days? We already have our hands full with
What
it.
about those contracts to protect
No, no. So you see that?
pipelines in
No,
that
no. So
area?
that's different. That's to monitor pipelines. Those companies were not engaged to maintain peace. That's the job of the police, and that's the job of the government. Now, if the Niger Delta people as a collective reject this move and the
Mhm.
militants go back into the waters, can we deal with militancy in the South South? Can we deal with terror in the Northeast, the Northwest, and I dare say even the North Central? Can we deal with unknown gunmen in the Southeast? We just have too many problems on our hands at the same time. I'm of the opinion that I want to believe this is just reported. They're testing the waters and they're not actually going to carry this out.
Well, I mean, some information that's coming out from inside sources saying that the former administrator who was out at DQ was supposed to have ended the program, but instead he just kind of transmuted it into the what was it, the Niger Delta. I've forgotten
Stabilization fund.
stabilization. Thank you. That's the one. And so hence why we now have this interim or reported. Oh, we'll see
And
like
then
you said, reports, but
one last
we'll
point.
wait for confirmation.
The federal government is seeking to scrap amnesty in one part of the country, but is seeking to start it in another part of the country, in the Northeast. Now, where does equity come into play? Because whether they like it or not, if you scrap the amnesty program in the South South and you start it in any other part of the country, well, because of inequity and the absence of justice.
Well, the people, what do you think about this? So let me take a quote from an elder of the region, Chief Anab Sarigbe, who said that scrapping of the program would, and I quote, be one of the worst decisions the federal government will take. The amnesty program is one of the tools used to arrest the militancy in the Niger Delta. The moment it is wound down, Nigerians will see many more agitations and should also expect another northeast in the country. Well, let's move on now. We've got this next one. So a list has been making the rounds on social media, and people have had their reactions to it. Let's see what we have to say on Freshly Pressed, and of course, your reactions on the different platforms: Twitter, WhatsApp, and YouTube. So from the Punch newspaper, Knox says Buhari's men and others get national awards with criticism on Sunday, trailing the publication of the names of those who are to be conferred national honors by the president of Nigeria. He said to honor 437 people, and this is at at Nigeria's National Honors Awards 2022, which is scheduled for the 11th of this month. Oh yeah, because we are in October, which is scheduled for the 11th of this month. And the list of nominees, which has now gone viral on the internet, generated quite a bit of it's fair bit of criticisms with people saying there's quite a number of politicians on this, and some names that we did not expect to see. What do you say about this, Mr. C?
Okay, thanks, Shopra. I had cause to go through the list
Hmm.
for all 437 nominees, and it made me question or try to remember what exactly is the criteria used in selecting these individuals that are given national
And
awards.
that is a question a number of people have been asking.
So clearly,
Mm.
I looked at it and clearly there are a number of them that have no business being on that list. There's a chap called Sabiu Yusuf. His nickname is Tunde. He's one of the essays to the president at the dinner. There's absolutely no basis for giving him a national award. You have the immediate past Chief Justice of Nigeria, who, in a move never seen before, his brother justices, all of them, accused him of a lot of shockingly burdening allegations. Those allegations have not been investigated. We don't have the conclusion to those investigations. And boom, he's given an award. For what precisely? You have the Senate president, the current Senate president, giving one of the highest awards. For what precisely? In other countries, national awards are not given to all and sundry, and they're given to people who have clearly excelled or shown themselves to have the qualities deserving of those awards. So the question now is, gentlemen, whoever put this list together, what did you consider? A lot of them are serving senators, serving governors. So is one of the prerequisites for a national award the fact that you hold executive office?
I have to say, because if you look down the list and you see the category of what they are, right? A huge part of it is governor, governor, minister, minister, senator, senator.
True. And then guess what? Governor Fayemi, the outgoing governor of Ekiti State, in 2014 was given the award Commander of the Order of Niger of the Niger in 2014. Guess what? The squad that put this list together gave him the same award this year. Is there nobody actually checking what has been done previously and making sure mistakes are not made? Because how do you give the same award twice to the same individual? It just begged, and then the current CJN has an award for what precisely?
Maybe they believe he deserves it twice over, maybe even more. As Mr. C shakes his head. But there are some recipients on there that make you say, okay,
Yes,
this
some
makes
are
sense.
deserving, but I dare say that a good number of them have no business being on that list. It's either you have money, you have political connections, you hold political office, or your friend. Okay, there's an Alhaji Maman Daura who is Buhari's nephew, but is actually older than Buhari. He's on the list. For what precisely?
People, what are your answers and what are your questions about this? Let us know. All right, so I'll take it over to WhatsApp, where Bosun Ajay from Amuodofin says African countries like Nigeria spend billions of dollars yearly on security votes to force, and this is in quotes, peace and unity on their citizens. These are monies that can be used on education, health, and infrastructure. There can't be unity without equity and love. You can't force people without common ways, beliefs, and language together, no matter what you do. It's not, well, you're not supposed to force them together. You're supposed to encourage them to grow together, right? Because it takes time and a certain willpower and inclination to do it. And sometimes a lot of TV spoken in the same language. All right, Benga Akamu says the government wants to stir the pot in the Niger Delta with its decision to end the amnesty program now. They will rescind that decision. Well, reported. They will rescind that decision. Are politicians reading the room clearly? Bengakamu asks. And he also says, do we not have ordinary Nigerians who have led exemplary lives and who deserve national honors? Look at the national honors list. The same people always who contributed to the state of the nation are being given honors. For what really? For ruining the nation? And it seems the only criteria for national awards in Nigeria is the holding of executive office. So sad, says Benga Akumu. I have to remember, although there was quite a number of people who are holding these posts, there are other people on that list as well. And as we look at the bad, we should also look at the good, because there are some people who are being honored for returning suitcases of
And
money
so
that they had found
they were
and whatnot.
given medals, not the more important awards.
Okay, there's that. But at least they made the list. I'm trying to look for the positives, Mr. C. But let's see. Linda from Yaba says national honors congratulating themselves for successfully ruining the country. Oh, I see there's a trend in where we're going with this. All right, next story that we've got up for discussion comes in from the Daily Post. Atala Oilfield NUPRC under fire in Senate over wrongful reallocation. Mr. C, can you take us through this?
Okay, thanks, Brad. So very quickly, an oil mining lease, specifically OML 46, was granted by the defunct DPR, Directorate for Petroleum Resources, Department of Petroleum Resources, to a consortium led by Bayelsa Oil Company, Hardy Oil Nigeria, and Century Exploration Production Limited. Now, the defunct DPR purportedly revoked the OML on the grounds that they hadn't produced any crude oil, right?
Mm-hmm.
But guess what? This is where the story becomes very interesting. They refuted that move and insisted they had not only produced crude oil, they had paid royalties to the government based on what they had produced and sold.
That's a whole new dimension to this, okay?
Good. So now the Senate steps in and invites And then the OML was then re-awarded to a company called Hawking Exploration and Production Limited. The Senate invites Hawking Exploration and Production, and after a while, they stopped turning up for the hearings and filed a lawsuit. Now, the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission was the agency set up to replace the DPR upon the commencement of the Petroleum Industry Act. Now, one of the commissioners showed up at the hearing and tried to justify why Halkin should retain the OML license. Now, what had happened is sometime last year, Association of Marginal Field Operators had gone to meet the president and complained about the wrongful revocation of their licenses, and he had then instructed the then DPL to meet with them and re-award those, return those, restore the licenses, provided they could show they had been producing, they had been paying the royalties, and they had given a fair consideration for the licenses they held. Now, in the case of OML 46, that was not followed, and they went to the Senate for justice. Now, a commissioner shows up from the NUPRC, which is the body that replaced the DPR, and insisted that they had to continue, that they inherited the matter and they would continue. And the Senate committee says no. If you say that you have properly awarded the OML 46 license to Hawking, where is the presidential statement on that matter? Now, the reason why they're asking for a presidential statement, the president doubles as a minister for petroleum resources. So they're saying there must be documentation to this effect. Can go and produce the documents. Two, he also gave evidence that was at variance with documents before the committee and before. So Hawking has sued the National Assembly, taking the National Assembly to court. Now, in its affidavit before the court, Hawking had indicated it had spent $60 million in respect of that field. The commissioner comes before the Senate and says Hawking had not invested in the field, but had invested in equipment. And the Senate committee took umbrage for the following reasons. One, you're supposed to be impartial. Why are you acting and seemingly defending Hawking? Two, the affidavit before us, before the court, says a different story. So they've insisted the documents must be produced. Now, given the fact that it is currently in court, we'll watch to see how this plays out.
We must continue with the coverage of this because this is wow, so many turns to this. All right, let's move on now. So our next story that we'll be touching on comes in from the Vanguard. Federal government cautions ASU over disobeying National Industrial Court's order. And it has so the Minister of Labor and Employment, Dr. Chris Ngige, gave the advice in a statement signed by Mr. Olajide Oshundu, who's the Deputy Director of Press and Public Relations in the ministry, and this happened yesterday. I'm going to quote this: "The union is dishonest and misleading its members and the general public that has filed an appeal as well as has a stay of execution of the order of NICN on September 2nd, though it has none of this. Rather, ASU only filed an application for a permission to appeal the order." It goes on and on. Mr. C, considering the fact that just over this weekend we saw a trending video of what was almost a case of fisticuffs. So much there's just so much bad blood currently in negotiations when it comes to ASU and the federal government through the minister also of labor, Dr. Chris Ngige. At this point, is there any way through the forest of this? But focusing on this particular thing about the minister saying that ASU is disobeying the National Industrial Court's order, what would you say?
Okay, thanks, Chocolate. So the starting point, negotiations were still ongoing or seemingly ongoing. The federal government rushes to court and obtains an injunction against the strike. An injunction basically says ASU must return to the classrooms, right? Now, ASU has filed an application which I understand is a leave to appeal. I haven't seen the documents and I haven't taken the pains to look for them. Now, the federal government is insisting that ASU should return to school. Now, here's the thing. Most of the schools that have been closed are government owned, either federal or state. So it's not really a question of go back to school. The government owns the schools, order the schools to be opened. and let's see what happens. Now, it's a sign of bad faith when you're in negotiations with another party to now take steps that seem to undermine the whole negotiation process. And in the video you made reference to, seemingly very shocking, you find a minister walking out of a room where discussions are ongoing.
Hmm.
And his position is that,
But also not the first time we've seen this
yeah,
with regards to this
now
strike.
his position was that he had taken leave to go and attend to other matters. Excuse me, for the love of everything good under the sun. What could be more pressing for you, Minister of Labour, at this point in time than resolving this lingering crisis? You are heading into an election. This is a pre-election year, and the administration, the ruling party, continues to act as if it's not a problem. I'm sorry, it is a problem because you now have two groups of students whose lives are literally in abeyance. You have people who wrote the UME exam last year, who passed, have not entered school. You have the group who've written it this year.
And
There's
it's
no
looking likely that they're
there's
not
no chance. It's not looking likely they'll get in this year. Then you have
going
the
to be
group
fair.
warming up to write the exams next year. So I'm truly shocked that he even suggested he had other things to do. Now the truth of the matter is, it is money that will soften this issue. Pay. I've repeatedly said on this show, AS is looking for about 200 to 20 billion, right? Look for 50 to 70 billion. Give it to them now. And I assure you the schools will be open before December.
The
As to,
federal government has heard this. It's heard this advice and these, steps forward. And yet the key or the statement is there is no money. Where are you
no,
going to shake this money
no,
out of?
no,
We're budgeting it for 2023 and that's
no.
all we can do.
There's a lot of waste at the government levels, federal and state. National Assembly, state houses of assembly. There's a lot of waste going on. They do not want to cut out the waste. It's not that there's no money. The money is in the wrong places. The money is being spent wrongly.
So, Mr. C, we have this is freshly pressed. We have a history. We've addressed this before, right? At this point, ASU has seen the federal government's intractability. Federal government has seen ASU's intractability. What gives?
Okay.
What can give?
So if I were advising ASU, I would advise them to return to school. Not because the problems have been solved,
Mhm.
but because you're sending a message. We will go to school before the elections. We'll review our position. And now, when the Nigerian students can clearly see the real source of their issues, they can clearly see their futures and their destinies being toyed with carelessly. When it is time for the elections, they will vote according to their consciences. Because at this point, we cannot continue to have a government that is seemingly indifferent to lingering issues. This issue it's not rocket science. And like you rightly said, we all know the answers. We all know what needs to be done.
All right, Mrs. C, we don't have too much time, so I'd love to look at this next article. Hold on, that comes in from this day newspaper. Rearmament: federal government procures 37 fighter jets and attack helicopters from U.S., Italy, and China. This is in a renewed bid to boost the fighting capacity of the air component of the military establishment, and comes as military authorities said over the weekend that no Nigerian territory is under the control of terror group Boko Haram or any other group for that matter.
So I will start with the first part. Now, when they say procure, what readily comes to mind is they procured it and they're here. No, that's not the way it works. These are not aircraft you buy off the shelf. You have to place the orders and then they have to be made, then they have to be delivered. Now, it's a good step the federal government is taking to rearm and to reposition the Air Force specifically for the years ahead. And it's a very commendable move.
Mm.
And it is hoped that if these platforms, these aerial platforms, are properly used, it should reduce the menace of the terrorists terrorizing the nation. Now, to the second part of the story.
Before we get to that second part, I'd just like to put in that yes, talks have reached an advanced stage for the procurement and delivery of 24 fighter jets. They've already taken delivery of 10 J7 fighter planes that were procured from China.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the federal government is seemingly The federal government under President Buhari is seemingly determined to reposition the military, and it's good that he's an ex-general himself. Now, to the second part of the story, that no part of Nigeria is under the control of terrorists. I'm sorry. What information are they working with? Is this dated information? Is this current information? Because the feelers from the people on the ground suggest otherwise.
Being in the military, I would hope that this is not dated information, but rather current.
No,
But yeah,
but
feelers from the people.
yeah, the information they're providing is a total variance with information from people who live under the control of these groups. Now,
And are paying them rent money and protection money and all
yes,
sorts.
so you have the terror groups, you have the bandits, you have the kidnappers. So I'm sorry, what sort of misinformation is this? It's not correct and it shouldn't be put out. But again, this is Nigeria. Information will be carelessly put out, which is not correct, which is not checked, and nothing will happen.
All right, let's take some messages before we take our last story of the day about the second Niger Bridge. Dami from Ikeja says national awards home and abroad are almost always controversial. These lists are more often packed with the favorites of the current powers of the day. It's past time to scrap them. Anyone looking for an unrequited title should buy one from his or her traditional monarchy. Um, Godwin from Bagada says Nkige went out because the ASU chairman was inciting the public to vote out APC when he was supposed to focus on the meeting issues. And Benga Akamu says, can the federal government prove that none of its territories is under terrorist control? We need proof, not mere words. And second Niger Bridge is going to be ready in December. That is what the federal government says. It comes in from the Punch newspaper. Real quick, Mr. CEO, thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Shopran. If it's ready by December 22, that'll be wonderful news. Now, however, there are two approach roads, one from the Delta and one from the Anambra end that have not been worked on, and they want to start work. So when they say it will be ready for use, it then begs the question, what are you inaugurating if it's not fully ready? Now, the same federal government says it will be fully ready by December 2024. You are leaving office in May 2023. You've had challenges funding that bridge, and you do not know whether the incoming administration will also have challenges. So let's just say that's a projected date, and that's a hopeful date. But it's a wonder what they're going to commission in December 2022. We'll wait and see.
All right, and we are done with the show. It's been an interesting one. You can always go and catch the replay up on youtube.com/smooth981FM. Lagos, thank you for sending in your messages and sharing in the conversation. Keep doing it because coming up at 8:15, it will be the locker room where we get to talk sports. And at 9 o'clock, Lagos, you will be talking. But for now, it's time to say goodbye to Mr. C, but not really. See you later up on Twitter. Find him at Monsieur C. There are 3 E's after that. See Mr. C. It's been fantastic as always. I look forward to seeing you once more on Freshly Pressed on another day. And that's that. Coming up, 8:15, the locker room.
The headlines, the stories, the news.
Thanks, Mr. C. Okay, now it's time to get into locker room.
Hi, James.